This podcast is proudly sponsored by Joro Protein, a Rhode Island plant-based protein supplement company designed for athletes and adventurers. They deliver 25 grams of protein, 5 grams of BCAAs, and 18 essential vitamins and minerals. It's non-GMO, it's gluten-free, it's allergen-free, no artificial flavors, no added sugar or stevia, and it has no additional gums, thickeners, or fillers. Right now, you can get 30% off on this podcast with the code JORO Rhody Strength 2022, and you can find them at joroprotein.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Phase CBD. That's P-H-A-Z-E. They are a local Rhode Island company who makes and manufactures a wide-ranging variety of CBD products that are formulated specifically for athletes. It doesn't matter if you're a CrossFitter, a strongman, bodybuilder, or powerlifter. These products are for you. These products range from tinctures to seltzers to even roll-on applicants. By supporting this business, you're supporting a local Rhode Island business and you're supporting this podcast directly. Please check them out at phasesports.com.
Hey, what's up, Ryne?
Not much, man. How are you?
Doing good. Thanks for hopping on with me.
Absolutely. So I am outside because my dog is special and he's afraid of the washing machine. So if there's any sound, because I have the headphones on, like if there's any sound that's like getting in the way of the audio, I'll run inside. He'll stay outside. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. No, I mean, it sounds pretty good right now. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, you're coming through. There was just a guy like blowing the 4 leaves that fell off the tree since last week. I mean, I guess they pay him for it, so they have to do something, but it's like...
Hey, it's like, all right, it's warm out, time for some spring cleaning.
Right. I don't know what's going on with all of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, totally appreciate you hopping on. And actually, as I was going through some of your like your Instagram and just getting ready for this podcast, I saw your dog on there. And
yeah,
that's a super cool looking dog. What kind of dog is that?
So he's a Boykin Spaniel.
Okay.
Which is a newer breed. It's actually the state dog of South Carolina.
Okay.
So like they're bred close here because we're in North Georgia.
Yeah.
And it's like a mix between like a cocker and an American water dog, like the kind that Obama had.
Sure.
So they don't shed too much. It's more like human hair. So there's a lot of it, so it still falls out. And they're like retrieving dogs.
That's so cool. I just got a chocolate lab myself, and I saw the picture of your dog quickly, and my chocolate lab's a puppy. He's 5 months old, and their faces look identical.
Yeah,
they look so. Yeah, and like color and everything. I'm like, oh my god, is it chocolate lab? And then I saw another picture, and I saw all the long hair. I'm like, no way. What kind of dog is that? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's when he was a puppy, before the hair really grew, a lot of people thought he was a chocolate lab.
Yeah,
but now, I mean, that doesn't happen too often anymore, but every now and then we still get someone who's like, oh, that's a really cute chocolate lab puppy. And I'm like, he's 5 years old.
He's full grown. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was cool. I wanted to make sure I asked you about that. So, just to start off, I know, and again, thank you. I know you're probably crazy busy with the open right now, getting everybody prepped up for that. And, we got the announcement 3 hours in about 3 hours what the workout's going to be, which I'm super pumped for. Do you have any predictions on that?
I've kind of stopped trying to worry about all of that. Like I have a handful of athletes who still like to play the game, and it's just like there's no point in putting any mental energy into it. Especially for us, like all of us coach somewhere between, on the low end, I think maybe 1 or 2 of the coaches have like 10 or 12 athletes, but most of us are closer to 20 to 25.
Wow.
So it's like as soon as the open gets announced, it's like it is a scramble to get programs out, the online programs altered, and taking any like time worrying about anything else is just not worth my, energy.
So this is a little bit like the calm before the storm right now.
Yeah. There's nothing we can do. Like I'm running a load of laundry, cleaning up the house, and then I'll head over to the gym. I'll probably leave here around 2 or 2:15 just in case there's some traffic. But yeah, there's literally nothing to do until 3 p.m.
And another question on that. So in years past, I remember them announcing it later in the day. Like, I think it was like 5 p.m. Pacific time, maybe like, or I remember watching it here. I know you're probably in the same time zone, East Coast, around like 8 p.m.
Yep.
Are they announcing it earlier now?
They are. Yes. Those nights were awful because like we were still getting it out. Like everyone's trying to get their strategy to you. Basically, it was I would just stay up until about 11:30 or midnight. And then you wake up the next day at 7, immediately get to work, go into the gym around 9, start judging people until 1 or 2 p.m. and then back into writing programs. Like your own fitness has to take a back seat.
Sure.
And then you're destroyed. Like Saturday wouldn't have been productive either from your fitness perspective. And yeah, so it's a very welcome change for all of us.
That's good. That's nice. So, and do you guys have like a watch party per se? Does everybody kind of go, yeah?
Yeah. So I don't know. Have you ever seen any of the videos of like our podcast in that like huge room?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So we have like a huge, like a big room that's probably, it's like, it used to be 2 individual offices and they knocked down the wall, or maybe even more than that. But so now there's like a huge table that can seat 7 or 8 people around it comfortably, and then it's pushed against the wall, which is why it can't seat more. And we have the TV there, and then there's plenty of space for people to drag in chairs, stand up in the back. So probably all but 3 or 4 people from the staff will be there. I know we have a couple of people who are out of town this week.
Cool. Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah. But yeah, that's one thing that has always been really fun, is to like not predict the workout, but like predict what you think the scores are going to be and stuff like that, you know, betting on who's going to win the workout, and just kind of having fun with it before you start like really diving into work.
Yeah, I'm excited because I think historically they've always had a really good like production value too, of like the whole like unveiling of the open workout. Like back obviously when Castro was doing it, like he did an incredible job, like kind of like just the way he presents it, and the way he like had like, but wait, there's more type of like
yeah,
the way he says things. So it's always like really like entertaining. It's like fun to watch.
Yeah. So back when I used to manage a CrossFit gym in New Orleans, and we hosted the 2014 open announcement. And ironically, Alessandra Pacelli was the athlete, and I was like her cameraman's escort to make sure that nobody got in the way of tripping him. And then I ended up like writing her running programming like 6-7 years later.
No way.
Yeah, just kind of funny how that worked out. But man, when you talk about like they are prepared, like they spend so much time rehearsing the announcement, going through everything. It was really cool to watch.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you can tell they do a really good job with it. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, and Castro, man, he loves playing that role. I know a lot of people didn't like him. Maybe it was time for a change for the sport, just from like a getting away from a specific subset of biases in the programming. But his personality suits that role so well. And I was kind of sad to see him not be able to play it anymore.
Yeah. I know like they let him go, but now he's back as an affiliate. He's an affiliate manager or something. He has some role, right?
Unclear to me. Yeah, something like that.
So I know that he's like at least has some ties with the organization. So I wonder if they'll bring him on in some role as far as an announcement. That would be cool if they did that this year, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because, I mean, who in the organization is more recognizable.
Totally.
I mean, that, everyone knows who Bosman is, but like Castro is still kind of the face of the games when people think about who runs the games.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be cool if they incorporated him somehow, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. For sure.
But so I want to get into a little bit about your bio, and I guess I'll give just a brief overview of kind of where you're coming from. So you're a coach over at Training Things Tank since 2015. So you've been there for a while.
I have. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I was actually one of the original athletes under Max in 2013. So when Max created the company, I was an athlete under him. And so I've always kind of had a tie to the brand.
You said in 2013?
Yeah. Yeah. Like back when I was still trying to compete in CrossFit, pretending like I was a good athlete.
Hey, you were, I did some research on you. You made a regional twice, 2013, 2014.
Yeah. So that was on a team. Yeah, it was, I guess I was an okay CrossFitter. And one of the big things, I had capacity, I had strength, and very poor movement quality. So CrossFit just exposed that really bad.
Yeah.
So trying to go through squat snatches and stuff like that just wasn't really my jam.
Totally. No, I feel that. I definitely feel like I'm a bit in the same boat with a lot of that stuff, especially when it comes to the gymnastics. But I feel a lot of people struggle with that too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's probably one of the most common limitations in the sport, even in people who perform at the high levels. You watch some of these games athletes move and you're like, ooh, that could be cleaned up in a major way. You're still leaving a lot on the table right now.
Totally. Yeah. So a little bit more into your bio. So, you have a background playing soccer, playing baseball, high school and collegiate level?
I stopped soccer after my freshman year of high school. Without going into too much detail, I was told I would be on the JV team as a sophomore, and I knew that I was going to start in baseball as a sophomore, and in Louisiana, those sports overlap. So I would have missed probably a fifth of the baseball season because our soccer team was very good. And I would have gotten brought up onto the varsity team for the playoffs or whatever. And I had no desire to do that.
Yeah. Cool.
So, yeah.
And then, we'll definitely dive more into this, but so you started CrossFit after college, and then even from there, you got into or what you're competing in now is more of the distance running, marathoning, and then your clientele. Obviously, we'll get more into this, but you've worked with CrossFitters, bodybuilders, baseball players, marathon runners, and then just people, just general fitness. And I got to on that as well. And then, like you said, you're in Alpharetta, Georgia, working at Training Think Tank, the HQ.
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty much sums up how I got here. So
we're kind of skipping around a little bit, which is awesome. I love it. But so I usually start these podcasts off with a couple of rapid fire questions. I just kind of find them interesting, and
all right.
Sometimes they spur some discussion. So and this could be anywhere in the US, but if you have a favorite coffee shop, I'm guessing probably somewhere in Georgia, but could be anywhere.
Yeah. So I have a favorite coffee shop everywhere that I go regularly. Big coffee person. In Alpharetta, I guess technically it's in Roswell, which is the adjoining city to Alpharetta, is Pop's Coffee Shop. It is attached to a motorcycle shop, and they do exclusively, well, not exclusively pour overs, but it's all handcrafted coffee, if you will. And that's my go-to for sure.
That's awesome. I had the opportunity to go down to Alpharetta. It was a few years ago. My fiance, her parents lived there at the time, but they've since moved. And so now I have no excuse to go down there, but I'm sure at one point or another, because Alfred is right. It's right north of Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure at some point I'll find my way down there, and I'll keep my eyes open for that Potts Coffee Shop.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, it's the best, just like cup of coffee in the city. It might not be the best, like from a work standpoint or whatever, but if I'm just getting coffee, like that's where I prefer to go.
Love it. Next one we got is a very similar question, but favorite go-to breakfast. Now, a lot of people will say, like, I like to make my breakfast at home. Like, kind of like, what's your go-to, like, standard, typical meal that you like to have, or ideal meal, I would say?
Yeah. So with being in running, as you kind of alluded to earlier, I just do Kodiak cakes because
Nice.
it gets me like mostly carbs and protein, not a ton of fat, so that I can go straight into my run. It's warm here most of the year. I wouldn't say it's hot. But yeah, like if you're not out the door by 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, like some of the heat can become oppressive on 80-90 minute runs.
I totally get that. I've only done one marathon, but part of when I was like supposed to be peaking for it, I was on vacation in Aruba.
Oh yeah.
So
No.
I totally relate to that. I'm like, okay, if I don't get my run in before 9 a.m., it's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
That's
No. 100%. Which one did you run?
I was at a local one in Rhode Island, the Narragansett Marathon.
Okay.
It was actually
Okay.
so it was like the gyms were closed, and I was like, I'm gonna take up running this year, and didn't have like a super like great time. I finished like in just under 4 hours, which I was really happy about. But it was actually the only marathon in the state that year. It was a COVID got bad, they canceled all of them, and then it got a little bit better. They had that one, and then it got bad again. They canceled. So it was the only one of the year. So I kind of with timing.
Yeah, nice. I had a few people do virtual, and I was like, there is no way I wouldn't run a virtual marathon. Like, not try.
Yeah,
Like, I would long run it, sure, but like not
actually
race it. Yeah.
Nah, I feel that, especially like that being my first one. Like I really wanted the experience of it. So yeah,
For sure.
Tough. Definitely a tough
Yeah.
one. That's cool. Kodiak cakes are bomb. I love those.
Oh yeah, amazing.
So we got next rapid fire question. I like this question a lot, but if you're not a big Instagrammer, then if you just say that, we'll go on to the next one. But favorite Instagram accounts, and I usually describe this as like maybe something like within the health and fitness field, or it could even be something that you just find like entertaining, or something that just pops up on the feed and like that you like seeing.
Yeah. I have a few from, so like the three that I really like tend to gravitate towards and like and agree with a lot of the stuff they say, not all of the stuff. Steve Magnus, which is kind of that, he is a running coach who has dived into being an author and doing some research on psychology and stuff like that. BioLane, which is more of a nutrition podcast, or not podcast, Instagram account. And Caleb Watson, who is just a movement person.
You said Caleb Watson?
Calum. I think he's Australian. Calum, I believe is how he spells his name.
And the first one
just
with Steve Magnus?
Steve Magnus, yeah.
Awesome. I've heard of BioLane. I love his stuff. He's very kind of no nonsense. I'm gonna be straight up with you.
I gravitate to people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me how it is.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah. You don't need to sugarcoat it. Just like, give me the facts. So let's go.
Yeah, I like his stuff a lot. But yeah, I'll definitely follow the other two. You said Caleb Watson is more like movement oriented. Steve Magnus is more like run coaching style.
He's kind of moved away from posting, like, so he uses a lot of psychology stuff with running as his lens through which to view it. He himself was a very, very good runner. He has coached many runners. If you follow running, like, you'll know a lot of the names of people he's coached. But I think kind of the research and being in that field is more where he's going right now.
Nice. Cool. I like that. All right. Next question we got for you is along the same lines, pretty similar. Favorite podcast, could be within the health and fitness field, could be just something else you find interesting.
Yeah. So shameless plug of the training think tank Corpus Animus podcast. But I listen to a few podcasts regularly. One is the Compound podcast, which is with Ian Happ, who is a Cubs baseball player, and two other guys who are like minor league kind of guys that lived with him during COVID.
Cool.
And then No Stupid Questions, which is an economics podcast with Angela Duckworth and Stephen Dubner.
Sweet. Love it. When doing a little bit of research for this podcast, I came across a fact that you were actually named after a Cubs player.
I was, yeah, or am, yeah.
So,
I've actually gotten to meet him, so that's been cool. Yeah,
So you're a big Cubs fan.
huge Cubs fan. We go up there. We try to go up there once a year. I think last year was the first year they had games at the stadium that we didn't get to a game at Wrigley Field since like 2012.
Wow.
So yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Kind of next question along the same lines, favorite books, recent books, or maybe just a favorite book in general. And this could be audio books too, something that's either entertaining, health and fitness, or just something that you like.
Yeah, I really like I don't know the right phrase for like the Malcolm Gladwell type books, but things like him and Dan Coyle, so Tipping Point, Outliers, Culture Code, those kind of, they're research based books that are told through stories. Some of them are not completely factually accurate, but they're still entertaining.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Almost like it's a fiction genre, but almost with like some science, like science-based facts, like this potentially could happen type of scenario in a way.
I think that it would be classified as nonfiction because the stories are real, right?
Yeah.
Like, talking about like why is there a hotbed of sprinting talent in Jamaica, and like those kind of things. But like one of the things that Gladwell points out is the 10,000 hour rule, which is simply not accurate.
Sure.
So like those kind of things, and some of the other explanations for some of the things that he has are maybe not exclusively accurate, right? Like saying like the Jamaican hotbed of talent is because it's just a cultural thing, just eliminates the fact that there is clearly a genetic component to speed.
Did you also, and I want to ask about the 10,000 hour rule, and so let's start with that. As far as that, what's kind of because obviously the people hear that like, okay, it takes 10,000 hours to really develop like mastery in something, but what would be that? Would you say like more component?
I'm sorry, you broke up just for a second. What happened?
So the 10,000 hour rule is, I mean, basically the concept is it takes 10,000 hours of practice or dedication to something to develop mastery. So what would be kind of the argument? Okay, that doesn't really, that's not fully accurate. There's more to the story type of thing.
Yeah. So the premise being 10,000 hours of deep practice, not just, like a lot of people, that's something that needs to be distinguished. But what you see is like, okay, do you follow sprinting at all, like at the Olympics or anything?
Just barely. Just a little bit.
So like there's this kid, Noah Lyles. He's 18 years old, 19 years old. He's a 200-meter sprinter. Do you think it's possible for an 18 or 19-year-old to have 10,000 hours of deep practice to be elite at this sport? Right? There are many examples like that where you can just say like, no, clearly this isn't true. The thing is it's the average time it takes. But what we see is that the truly elite athletes, similar to like LeBron James, like he was a master of the sport by 18, 19 years old, by all accounts, right, he was one of the top 100 players in the world. Again, like, you can't have that much time in by that age.
Right.
So like those kind of things, you see like the most elite of the fields tend to get there closer to somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 hours.
Cool.
And then some people are just like genetic freaks and just show up and they're there.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned the sprinters in Jamaica, like obviously like Usain Bolt is the big one everybody knows, and you're thinking there's it's beyond just the 10,000 hours. There must be something like either like a genetic component or like a nature versus nurture situation. And to expand on that, I'm not finished the book yet, but have you read the book Born to Run?
I have not. I don't think so.
That's related to this. It's about this this journalist who goes down into this place in Mexico where there's these I guess Native Americans you would say, because it's North America, but there's a tribe of Native Americans who just like their whole philosophy and their whole culture is based upon like running, but not just running, like ultra marathon distance running.
Yeah.
And he takes them to a couple of them to Badwater, which is that ultra marathon race, and and they like perform like really, really well. And it's not like they had like all these like, you know, like scientific, like super like advanced like protocols and like progressions and like programs, but they've just like kind of just like developed like over time to become these like almost like elite like runners like in this like kind of like place in Mexico. So kind of like but I would say maybe like even Jamaica.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of nature nurture, right? So like no one would argue that speed is not genetically dependent. I wouldn't think. Like if you've played sports, like some guys have it and some guys don't. Right. It can be developed, and then what you see in communities where that is the sport is all of the talent goes into it. So now you're getting the very best of sprinters, right? Like someone made that analogy with the United States at the World Cup. And it's like, could you imagine if we had, you know, Mike Trout or any other guys, Mookie Betts from the baseball world, and then you have LeBron James playing goalie for you. And I mean, think about like I was watching the 76ers Cavs game last night, and like Donovan Mitchell's only 6'1" and is able to play in the NBA, comfortably dunk, and like he's so explosive. If you put that dude on a soccer field,
right,
you know, I can't imagine he wouldn't be very, very good.
True. Yeah.
You know, so we don't have that competitive advantage, if you will, in soccer specifically.
And you could even say the same with like Olympic level weightlifting is like in the it's getting more popular in the US, but in the relative comparison, these countries like Russia and China, and I don't know if it's that the people love the sport, but it's highly encouraged that the people participate in the sport, where it's like much more, there's a lot more people doing it, in other words.
Right. Yeah. and then like with having government stipends, I remember there was a guy, Kendrick Ferris, who's actually from Louisiana. So like he did some seminars. Matt Bruce was right up the road in Louisiana from where we were, and he did a couple of seminars, and like those dudes have jobs and like they get no government support. And what you're talking about from Russia and China, like they are paid by the government to be professional weightlifters.
Right.
And like some of the things we know about training adaptation and mitigating stress, it's like if you have to work a full-time job and then try to train either before or after, you're giving up your recovery, you're putting cognitive energy into something other than your sport. Like none of it's as conducive as if you were just a full-time athlete.
Totally. Do you think when it comes to professional CrossFit, obviously there's some guys and girls that can do it because they're getting the sponsorships and they're getting like they can do it as a full-time job, but Um, a lot of people can't. A lot of people are working that second job. So it's kind of it. I feel like we haven't really seen like what the true potential of it can really be comparative to like the NBA, fresh, where there's a lot of athletes being paid. Like, okay, here's your money, whether it's through sponsors, through like state sponsored or whatever. Like, go train full time. Like, we don't really see too many people being able to do that.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of untapped potential. I think Fraser's probably the closest we've seen to like the true professional, and that's not to say that there aren't professional athletes out there. But when you talk about like the ability to, I mean, he was at the OTC out in Colorado for weightlifting for many years prior to CrossFit, and then moved into CrossFit, and his parents were, you know, high level athletes themselves. So like he understood the discipline that comes with some of that and some of the sacrifices that come with that. And then his personality is very much, from what I can gather, I've only briefly met him, but like very much like, okay, I need to do these things to be at the level that I want to be at. And then just taking every decision he makes, like, is this moving the needle towards where I want to go or not? And if it's not, then I'm not doing it.
Totally.
You know, it's just kind of that more calloused, like rational view of everything. And he just doesn't seem to need that social interaction the way that some other athletes do. But I mean, it's getting there. It's definitely getting there. And you see the rate of progress in the sport is still astronomical, but it's definitely slowing compared to what we've seen from, let's say, 2011 to 2015.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, every year it's like, okay, we're just moving up by a little bit, versus like the huge leaps in like performance that we were seeing back when it first started. For sure. That's
So,
cool.
yeah, I mean, I hope that it gets to a point where we can have 50, 100 true professional athletes on, you know, either side. And then I would love to see the sport get to a point where the teams are professional as well. You know, I mean, now that we've done away with the affiliate cup model, like, let's, you know, start trying to professionalize that as well. I do think it would be beneficial to the sport to not have them at the same time. Like, even if it was just separated by a few weeks, it's just it's tough.
What do you think about the way they designed semifinals this year? Instead of doing everyone having different programming, you have one solid program that everyone follows.
You know, I'm kind of neutral on that. I don't think I mean, it does matter, because in my mind, right, if you put 30 athletes on the floor and you say, here are the workouts, as long as we all perform to our potential, the order of finish is predetermined.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like, if we just give a set of like, hey, your 1RM is going to be a squat snatch instead of a clean and jerk, it's like, well, that just moved athlete A from third place down to eighth place, and then they have a couple of other bad workouts. So like, it does matter, but I don't know that it's going to be any better or worse. You know, I mean, when I was competing in the Sport HQ programmed everything. The only thing I will say is I don't love athletes knowing the workouts 3 or 4 weeks in advance, which I think is the case for a couple of regions.
Think about that.
And it's nothing to do with them having a competitive advantage, because they're competing against people who also have that same knowledge. It's more that when you start focusing in on 6 workouts exclusively for a month, like we saw it a couple of years ago with the West Coast Classic, we had a bunch of athletes on site going there, and just elbows were getting achy, shoulders were getting a little bit wonky, knees were starting to be painful, because you're just training the same movements over and over again. So yeah, I mean, I would probably prefer to see that eliminated, but I don't know that there's a way to do that if HQ is going to program everything.
Yeah, I mean, unless they could somehow, this would be probably a logistical nightmare, but have all the competition on the same day, like
Yeah.
out the night before the style. But
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think in the athlete's interest, they should know at least a couple weeks in advance, especially if there's a new skill being thrown out there.
yeah,
But I think the biggest issue with doing it all at once is the judging. They only have so many judges that they truly trust. And when you start expanding the amount of judges required on a given weekend, like you're going to start seeing it look like local competitions. And some of those videos are, you know, less than desirable.
yeah, definitely. That's
And
sometimes stuff that gives CrossFitters a bad name when you tell people you do
yeah,
CrossFit. Ooh, is that okay for your body? Like,
yeah,
don't worry about the viral videos. That's not how it is. Like,
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
do
it's tough.
this. Like,
Right. Yeah, for sure.
all right. So, let's dive into a little bit more about, I guess. So obviously, I want to talk a little bit about Training Think Tank, about HQ, because that's super cool that you're there, you're in the trenches. Obviously, Training Think Tank has been working with high level athletes for a long time. Mike McGoldrick is someone who I've just known from watching Barbell Shrugs for so many
Yeah.
years. Travis Mayer, a really high level athlete. Noah Olson, Alexis is Raptis. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's it like? I mean, one, just being around that kind of like level of like expertise, including yourself, and just level of skill, but also what's it like programming? Because I mean, and obviously we have a mutual connection through Matt Early, who I've, and we'll talk about this as well. But what's it like for programming for different levels, like for the highest, and also for people who are just looking for this, and then somewhere everybody kind of in between.
Yeah. So programming for different levels on my end, right? So the way that we work with high level athletes is someone like Travis, Noah, Alexis all have their primary contact points as coaches. So Travis and Noah both have Max. Alexis has Adam. We could, go down the list of other athletes that we have who are maybe not as prominent, but everyone has like their primary coach. And I don't have anybody one-on-one who's at the games or like top 10 semifinals level. So for me, that programming looks like, for them, it is just running. Like I am diving into their running technique, writing some of their progressions, and then just communicating with the coach about the qualities that they need to train. But when you're talking about programming at that level, like the amount of things that you need to account for and have the athlete prepared for is kind of mind-boggling. And like watching some of those coaches figure that out, and you have to stay so on top of the sport, right? Like they're at that level, like you as coaches, we need to know what's coming out at Rogue, what's going to happen at Wadapalooza, and then even some of the smaller comps, because if one of them has something really creative, you can bet that someone else is going to steal it. So just having the various implements and things that they need to be prepared for, and then just the volume that they can handle is remarkable. Like it is one of those things that, like, when you start coaching some of the athletes at that level, you're like, I don't want to hurt them, but like they've been, yeah, and they have to have it, right? Because if they don't have that type of volume tolerance, they're at a competitive disadvantage when they go to compete. Because if you show up on day 2 or 3 and you can barely walk because there were 100 pistols in the workout the day before, like, you're not qualifying for the games, or you're definitely not performing if you're at the games.
Right.
So that at the high level, it's basically just organized chaos. Like, you're writing structured progressions for their specific weaknesses. But everything else is just really chaotic. When you kind of step down a level, there's more structure. You know, when you're talking about athletes trying to make the semifinals level, like Matt that you mentioned earlier, we're going to write a lot more structured progressions around the things that are limiting them from getting to their desired level. And then the chaos still needs to be there, but it's more injected into the program than like as comprehensive. And then kind of working down to the general wellness, my personal philosophy is like structure strength, and then everything else can be fairly chaotic, but low volume. Like you just don't need to beat people up if my mom is doing CrossFit, which she was for a while, like she doesn't need to do a toe to bar, sandbag clean, farmer's carry workout. Like that doesn't matter to her. She can do most of her work cyclically and just structure the strength so that she's able to live a better life.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of a bird's eye view answer of that, but that's kind
I
of
really and just to what you were just speaking about was kind of like the general wellness. I'm sure. Do you know the Active Life guys, like Dr. Sean?
I'm familiar. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. I've not ever really worked with them before, but
they're pretty big on their whole niche is like kind of like the general wellness, or I guess they've spread out, but one of their niches would be the general wellness population. And if you follow any of their Instagrams, they're really big on that. Like if you have someone like you were saying, like your mom or like someone like general wellness working on CrossFit, is like, we don't need to do this high level stuff. We just need to get them in the gym, feel good, keep them coming back, and just like build strength and just get them consistent.
Yeah, for sure. I think it gets tough when you get into affiliates, and that's where, like, in my ideal world, like affiliates would have like kind of like divided path of like people who want to kind of treat it like a sport and people who want to do more general health stuff. You know, I mean, because the general health stuff, yes, we need coaching on the strength portions and things like that, but if all I'm having you do is sled pushes, sled drags, assault bike, rowing, like you don't need as much oversight in your conditioning.
Yeah.
Right. On the days that we do kettlebell swings or something like that, sure, we need a little bit more oversight, but it's almost like CrossFit boot camp is the solution in my mind for long-term health and wellness.
Right. I like that. I know there's a couple of gyms that try to that do that, but I don't think a lot of gyms do it really well.
I don't have, and the thing is, like, I don't have an answer for how to do it well, because
I agree.
like like, what are you going to ask your coach to coach 2 different classes for an hour at $20 an hour? Like,
it's definitely tough. I agree. I think that's a really good point, because like if you're having 2 people with 2 completely different goals, obviously you have those scaling options, but it would almost be better to have them doing 2 separate workouts.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I think that's good. And then I guess a follow-up question on Matt. So someone like Matt, I want to talk about because his goal is semifinals or to compete at the highest level that he possibly can within CrossFit. And you've been working with him for a while. I've been seeing him for a while as a PT because of a back injury that he had. And I tell everybody all the time, I said on a recent podcast, I was so I was so blown away by, because he was showing me some of the programming that you were writing for him about like a lot of like the movement related work and like the rehab style work that you were giving him. And like I think one of the examples was like I was telling someone about the McGill Big 3 you were having him do in the very beginning. I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think like most people knew about that, like outside of the physical therapy world in general. So I'm like, that's some cool stuff. Like this guy really knows, like beyond just like programming, like you like really dove deep into like the health and fitness world for sure. So just it's been cool working collaborating with you on his recovery and training.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things we've benefited from, right, is the various backgrounds of athletes that we have. So, you know, like just you had mentioned, like Mike played hockey, not far from Atlanta here. He went to MTSU out in Murfreesboro. So he played hockey. I guess they had like a club level sport, but he was a very good hockey player. Brandon played football collegiately. Adam played soccer collegiately. So did Becky. Going down, like Max played D1 football and wrestled at the Division I level. And you just kind of, like my background in baseball, like you have so many various protocols that we're able to pull from those areas, like the shoulder rehab stuff and prehab stuff that I got from baseball and things like that, that it's been really helpful to be able to sit down and pick people's brains on, hey, I have this athlete who keeps, tweaking their elbow every time we do rope climbs. Who's had that before? Or what have you done that's worked? And, so it's, collaborating with each other. And then anytime an athlete gets outsourced and we have someone as communicative as you are, now I get to pull stuff. Like, I'm not writing rehab programs. That's not my scope, right? But hey, this is something that was really helpful from a rehab standpoint. Would it be appropriate from a prehabilitation standpoint to keep them healthy? I would say if you have the time, the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, totally.
So it's like I get to incorporate those kind of things every time. And then I've been fortunate to be friends. My fiance is an occupational therapist and therefore has friends who are physical therapists, and getting to hear some of their thoughts on things. Like she works at a spinal cord rehabilitation center. And hearing one of the PT's thoughts about, like, oh, if you can trick them into doing something, then like they'll do it and the pain like receptors won't activate because they're too focused on doing something goofy, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've ever seen, what is it 10 Cup, where like the guy has him like wear the hat backwards and the T behind his ear and like put the glove on inside out, and it's like, okay, you do all of that and then the swing's perfect. It's because you're not thinking about the swing.
Right.
And that's something I've actually been able to use in like a return to pressing program, where I'll put people in like a half kneeling lunge while balancing something in the other hand and pressing. And they're like so focused on everything else that's going on that they like forget that they're supposed to be in pain when they press.
Yeah, that stuff's so cool. Like from a neurological perspective, like being able to have the same pattern, but change almost like the sensory output of like the brain doesn't really think this is no longer a hazardous or like a a noxious or painful stimulus, but you're doing the same thing. You're kind of like you're almost like tricking the brain to be able to do that a different way. So now that is some pretty cool stuff. Super helpful with the return to squatting too. Like, okay, you're having a lot of pain with doing an air squat. Well, let's get you in quadruped, like hands and knees. Let's see if we can do back and forth. Oh, that feels good. All right, let's try it in this position. Like, that's really cool from a spinal cord facility, like the neurological perspective you can get on that, because the nervous system is so wild. And
I mean, like they're in mostly with like people who are paralyzed. So like they know that like long term these people probably aren't walking, but still getting them to function as optimally as possible to interact with the world. It's a really cool thing that they're doing over there.
Yeah. I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. So we got here's a question I was thinking of as I was preparing for the podcast. So training think tanks, it's been around for a while, and it's been really successful both from a performance standpoint, but also I feel like as a company, it's grown really well. Worldwide, I'd probably even say.
Yeah, I mean, we have athletes worldwide, and we now have coaches. One in Taiwan. Marco actually just came down for a couple weeks at the end of last month, beginning of this month. And then Matt Gilpin is in Australia. So we're kind of, I mean, I don't honestly know what the end goal is, like if it's to get them back here or if it's for them to stay there. But yeah, we're growing. And then athlete wise, I mean, we have athletes everywhere.
So obviously success on the competition floor, success of the company. Is there any, I wrote down is there any X factor? Is there anything you can really like chalk this up to, or any traits that you can say like, okay, this is why we're doing so well, or this is why I think things are going in the right direction?
Man, to isolate anything I think is a fool's errand, but the biggest thing that I would say is Max's ability to put together a staff that is very growth oriented. We are not satisfied with writing, adequate programs when we are capable of writing great programs. And his ability to continue that with every hire. And I think finding the personalities that fit into that mold has probably been one of the biggest things. And then, the ability for everyone to assimilate into the culture and be a productive member of the team. So yeah, I mean, I think everything always starts at the top, right? And Max's created that kind of system where, he's put good people in the same room and he leads from the front. I mean, you see the athletes that he's coached and the success that he's had as a coach. And that's a big factor, is like, we know some of the things that he's done from a work ethic perspective that you're like, all right, well, I don't know that I can match that, but I'm going to do my best.
That's cool. Yeah. It was one of those questions I was thinking about, like, I wonder if there's anything you can really put a finger on, because it's a hard question to ask, but I think that was a great answer. Yeah. Someone, a great team, great leadership, putting the right people in the right seats, essentially.
Yeah.
Awesome. And not being satisfied with being adequate. Just put out good product, good programs. They're great. That's awesome. As far as a client perspective, like working with individual clients, and this could be beginners, intermediates, advanced, what would you say are some of the biggest roadblocks that get into people's way from making progress or hitting their goals, or being able to continue with the consistency or compliance?
Yeah. If I'm being completely honest, like, I think the biggest thing that holds 90% of the athletes that I work with back is their recovery, very specifically their sleep. So, people will send me their Whoop reports for the month, and it's like 6 hours and 15 minutes on average, 7 hours. Life gets in the way. It's hard for some people. I mean, I have people who are up at 5:30 to get to work, and they don't get back from work until 5:30, and then they got to hit the gym, and like, nutrition is really hard. It's not meant to be, judgmental or anything. It's just like, that is the impediment, is if you don't have the time to sleep or whatever, like, we know based on all the research how important it is. And some people, I think, don't really understand, one, the impact that it has, but also when you start getting ready for bed. I don't know what I had this thought, was last night or the other night. Like, it was like we started getting ready for bed at like 9:45. Well, a lot of people will be like, that's when I go to bed. And then I wake up at 7 and it's like, oh, I'm getting 9 hours and 15 minutes of sleep. And it's like, no, like you didn't get to sleep until at least 10:30 if you started getting ready for bed at 9:45. So like things like that. That's probably the singular thing. And then it also amazes me like how much people will invest in Theraguns and sauna memberships and stuff like that before they, like, they'll do all of these other protocols before they get their sleep.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I wonder why that is. Like, I don't know if it's just like hard to quantify, like from like a numbers perspective, really how much of an impact it has, or just like, or I mean, I know it's talked about more now than maybe it was like 5-10 years ago, but yeah, I agree. It's like it's hard to get, I mean, myself included, it's hard to like really make that like a top priority.
Yeah, I would say that, in my opinion, it's the American work ethos.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm American, so like clearly,
Yeah.
but like it's the work ethic. Like, oh, if you're not working as hard as you can all the time, then you're not doing enough. So like, I'm gonna work harder at recovery than you are. It's like, just chill out. That is recovery.
Yeah.
Like, do things like sauna. Like, I'm using sauna protocols right now because I'm running Boston in April, and you never know what the weather's going to be like. So yeah, I want to be heat acclimated for sure, but I don't need to do it year round. I don't need to do some of the other stuff. I might do it, but I think just the ability to calm down is more important than some of the other things that people are trying to do.
Yeah, I agree. No, that's cool. I think that's good insight. Because yeah, it is one of those things where people are like, yeah, like nutrition, like you said, like, oh yeah, I know it's important, but it just gets put on the back burner so often, and it's interesting why that happens. But I think you're right. It's just kind of like maybe it's the price tag on the Theragun, like, oh, if I buy this, it'll be better. But you can't like really buy sleep. I don't know. There's something about it that back burner.
For sure. And nutrition's another one, man. Like, it's funny because you get, like, I work with a nutrition coach, so I have this set of protocols for macronutrients, and we're talking about right now like intra run fueling, just because it's a long time to be out there for 26 miles, and like you can't do it without fuel, or at least you can't do it well. And it's funny how easy it is to be like, stop measuring something, and before you know it, that tablespoon of almond butter turns into 2 tablespoons, and you're 100 calories off. And then it translates everywhere, where it's like, oh, now I'm eyeballing my rice, and instead of 11 ounces of rice, I'm getting 14 ounces. And before you know it, you're 600 calories over what you're supposed to be eating, and your goal is to lose weight.
Right. And not only are you not just staying at a plateau, you might be moving slightly in the wrong direction.
Exactly. And then it's like, oh, well, the coach doesn't know what they're doing. It's like, maybe, but
I got 1 or 2 more questions for you, then I'll
sure.
There's one that Matt, I talked to him yesterday. This Matt wanted me to ask you, and I thought I had written it down, but maybe I didn't. So I'm sorry, Matt, if I didn't get to it. There is one thing he wanted me to say, which was, do you think he'll drown during the frogman swim this summer?
No.
You wanted to know?
No. I started swimming with one of our coaches, Kyle Ruth, who swam at Indiana University. And for people who don't know, that is like a premier swimming university. So I started swimming with Kyle a few years back. I thought I was going to do a triathlon. at the end of one summer, and it just never materialized. But I was way worse than Matt was. And when you put those flippers on, like the fins, it makes such a huge difference in your buoyancy. He's going to be fine. He's like, yeah, if I'm able to swim like for 700, 800 straight meters without fins on, he'll definitely be able to handle it.
All right, cool. He'll be happy to hear that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna leave you with one last question. So first of all, you can say afterwards and where people can find you or anything that's coming up that you're excited about. But one question, which is sometimes kind of a tough one for people to just pull off the top of their head, but if you have a favorite quote, mantra, or saying, maybe not one, but one that you like. And the way I describe this question is I take it directly from Tim Ferriss's podcast, which is is Highway 95? Does that go through Atlanta, Georgia, or that's Florida, right?
No, I think 95 does go. So we have 75 and 85 in Atlanta. So 95 would be east, probably through Savannah, if I had to guess.
Okay. All right. So let's say 85 then. So you get a billboard. So typically they're taken by, the car accident attorneys, but you get one of those billboards. You can say something to like your community or a favorite quote, whatever you want on there. What would you put?
Yeah, I don't know that I have like something right off the top of my head that works well on a billboard.
Yeah, sure.
So my high school coach was really old school kind of guy. And it was a cool experience getting to play for him. He was actually, he has a book written about him. It's not a long book, but it's written by Michael Lewis, who wrote The Blind Side and Moneyball and a couple of more popular books that have been turned into movies, I believe. But his mantra was win the next pitch. And it's something that in high school, you're like, yeah, win the next pitch. Got it. All right. Like, you're 16 years old. You don't really have an understanding, but as life has progressed and it's like, okay, this didn't go well, but the only thing I can do is control my actions moving forward. And by sitting here dwelling on the past, like I'm wasting my time and energy doing something that has no potential to be productive. Like over time, yes, I should reflect upon the past, but not, living in the past is detrimental. So that's something that's always kind of stuck with me, is because the game of baseball in general is made up of about 300, 400 pitches in a game. So like each individual moment has an opportunity to be big, but likely isn't. And right. Dwelling on one minor issue potentially ruins the next 90% of what's going to happen. So that's kind of something that I've adopted a lot more as I've gotten older and, seen just how wise that was.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Almost like a spin-off of like live in the moment, but like really action focused,
yes,
action focused. I like that a lot. I really like that quote. That's a good one. I'll put it on a billboard.
Yeah. It's just hard because like unless you're like really being philosophical about it, you're like, all right, I don't really get this.
That's all right. Well, only a select few will get it. We'll take it.
Yeah.
No, that was great. I guess we'll leave off with where can people find you? Anything like exciting coming up?
Yeah, so on Instagram, Ryne_Sullivan_TTT. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but there aren't too many people with my name, so it's spelled RYNE. So I think if you just searched Ryne Sullivan, like you would probably not have too much trouble finding me. Yeah, aside from that, like some things coming up. Obviously, the Open's happening right now. We've got quarterfinals and then semifinals, so it's an exciting time for CrossFit. And in that time, I am trying to train for Boston to run, my best marathon, at least on that day, weather, dependent and all of that good stuff.
Do you have a goal you're shooting for that?
Man, it's gonna be very weather dependent. So it's just that it impacts the race so much, but the goal will probably be somewhere between like 250 as like conditions are perfect and everything feels great, down to like just breaking 3 hours and qualifying again for it next year. Not that I'll run it again next year, but just kind of like being able to run consistently sub 3 is huge.
That's so cool. Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, man. And enjoy the watch party over at Trent Tank.
Absolutely, will do.
Cool. All right. Thanks, man.
All right. Absolutely. We'll catch you later.
Yeah.